You probably heard about the wildfire smoke moving through New York this afternoon. Let's take a look at it on the visible satellite imagery. Looks almost like dust, like we see in the southern plains. Yeah, there's a little bit of thunder out there. But this is actually wildfire smoke coming from Quebec. And that's going to be the latest image, the heaviest smoke off of Long Island down into New Jersey, maybe some of it out there around the Poconos. But let's take a look at the METAR reports. And there we can see the impacts, widespread 3/4 of a mile up to 1.5 miles. Looks like the worst obstructions are in this area. See a couple plots there below 1 mile, another in eastern Long Island. And it improves as you go to the northwest. There's the surface map for this afternoon showing the extent of that smoke. Up in the northeastern U.S., temperatures are down in the 60s due to a combination of that reducing some of the solar heating, plus cold air advection coming down from Quebec and Ontario. Further out to the west, frontal system through the southeastern U.S., another frontal system in the northern plains, and then we get out to California. There we have some cool air coming from the Pacific into the deserts, only 75 degrees out there around Barstow, 75 in Las Vegas, and they're getting some elevated rain showers moving through their area. Storms developing in the higher elevations in New Mexico, all the way down towards the Davis Mountains. We do pick out kind of a vague dry line from Midland down the Serrano del Burros. And then looking up there in the northern plains, yeah, as you would guess, more thunderstorms in Montana and Idaho. Let's take a quick look up there in Alaska. Cold polar high covering the Arctic Ocean, keeping temperatures down in the 30s on the north slope. In the interior, under the influence of that low pressure area out there in the Bering Sea and the Gulf of Alaska, and that is an occlusion. And then going out into Canada itself, well, cold air up there in the high Arctic, and then we drop south and we get into some of the warmer air in southern Nunavut and the southern Northwest Territories. Rather mild 70s and 80s on the prairies, and then out there in eastern Canada, some rain from Labrador down towards the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Let's focus very quickly on the northeastern U.S. There's a look at the effects of that wildfire smoke. Looking at the New York City horizon, very impressive there. And as mentioned, they are under that northerly flow, cold air coming down through the Great Lakes, but quite dry. And you can see out there in Michigan, very low dew points down into the lower 30s, very wide temperature dew point spread, which means low relative humidity. And with dry fuels, gusty winds, low relative humidities, that's quite a recipe for fire danger. Similar problems out there around Pittsburgh, and same thing up there into Detroit. Precipitable water in Detroit this morning, 0.37 inches, near the record for the date. In the southeastern U.S., a weak frontal system through Atlanta up to Memphis, cool air to the north, and down south, lots of tropical air with dew points in the mid-60s to the mid-70s. And in that tropical sector, widespread thunderstorms all the way from Charleston, South Carolina, back towards Mobile, Pensacola, and quite a few of them on the eastern coast of Florida, from Jacksonville down through Orlando, West Palm Beach, and down towards Miami. And a very interesting little outflow cloud right there with those storms along this frontal boundary out there in the Atlantic. That's it right there. All right, let's take a look out there in Texas. And we definitely have the storms going on, although the problem is very weak bulk shears. In other words, the winds aloft, not really that strong, can't get much separation between the downdrafts and updrafts, so they tend to cancel each other out pretty quickly. However, further to the west, a little bit more shear. You can see these anvils moving to the east, still on the low side, but some of those cells capable of heavy rains, some small hail, and strong winds. Other cells west of Roswell, and there's also a pretty good chunk of moisture up there around Tucumcari to Clayton to Dalhart, and that may help get this area going as it comes off the mountains. So there could be some strong storms up there around Dalhart to Tucumcari later on. The northern plains, plenty of storms as well. They're getting some in the Kansas City area to Columbia and up there near Fargo. Lots of activity from Montana all the way down towards Wyoming and into the Rockies of Colorado. And the southwest, that's active. We talked about that front moving through the lower deserts in the southwest, and you can see the rotation in the upper level cloud field. That's the upper level low right there. Appears to be centered in the southern Sierras, and we're getting that rain out there around Las Vegas up to Desert Rock and back towards Bishop. And that's how it looks on the surface map. You can definitely see that gradient in the thickness contours. So that's definitely some cool air back there. You can see Bakersfield 63 degrees. This time of year, they should be up there near 90. 70 around Fresno, 70 at Stockton. So that's kind of a pleasant change from what we typically see this time of year. In the northwest, well, we talked about those storms in Montana. Rather dry as you get towards Seattle, temperatures almost 80 degrees, and 84 there. I guess that's going to be west of Bellingham. And we talked about Alaska as well, so I think we can head right to the forecast graphics. And we do have some major changes on the way. Let's go into detail on that. We start out with troughing on the west coast, troughing on the east coast, in between a ridge from Texas, the northern plains up to the Hudson Bay region. The jet is split. There's one segment up to the north, and I think we've got, well, that's probably a subtropical jet, got that anticyclonic curvature, but it probably has elements of a polar front jet because that is a baroclinic region out there in Southern California. And a cutoff high in the Dakotas. So those are all some very important features. Now let's see how they evolve going through the rest of the week. Little upper level low moves into the Great Basin area. We hang on to that troughing in the central U.S. It appears the northern periphery moves more into Alberta. Some very strong height falls in the northeastern U.S. Let's see where that came from. Yeah, that's that low pressure area consolidating across New York and New England. And offshore, some very strong jet stream winds. Going into the weekend, we hold on to ridging there in the central U.S., and we've got this cutoff low out in the southwestern U.S. We're starting to increase the flow into the southern plains. So you can see that starting out Monday morning, it is starting to get active in the southwestern U.S., and as we go into later Monday and Tuesday, strong flow rolling out into the Great Plains. So we're going to get back into an active weather pattern going into next week. Definitely a very big change from what we had over the past 3 weeks. The northern plains looks active for late in the week, but here comes another trough. And it does look like an active weather pattern, not for this weekend, but for the following weekend. You can see that strong jet stream dynamics coming out into the central plains. Probably Denver getting some severe weather, maybe Rapid City, and over into the Dakotas. Here's a closer look at how things will develop. This is the 500 millibar chart in the middle troposphere. Large low pressure area in the mid troposphere across the northeastern U.S., and a northerly jet into the Great Lakes area. The plains itself underneath this ridge, and you can see this low there in California with westerly jet stream energy feeding into New Mexico. So we bring this forward into this evening and into tomorrow. A couple of short waves, pretty obvious there in the flow, moving down through the Great Lakes area, but not much in the way of moisture in that region. Then as we go into the day tomorrow, still under the influence of ridging out there in New Mexico and Texas, that'll hold through most of the afternoon. And then going into Friday, we start to see that ridge breaking down. There's one piece of it right there, another little shortwave ridge right there, but this is all troughing, and there's going to be more height falls and troughing out to the west. And you can see that moving in through the weekend. That's a good strong negative tilt trough right there. The whole thing is a large long wave trough, and that's made up of smaller waves moving through the flow like spokes on a bicycle. And that brings us up to Monday and Tuesday. Now things are starting to get stormy in the Great Plains. We've got fast flow coming into Kansas, the Texas Panhandles, so that could be an active day. Same thing for Tuesday. Plenty of strong winds aloft, so that'll definitely change things around, and we'll have to start looking at maybe covering some severe weather early next week. And the other factor as we get into midweek and later in the week, we see height rises. Look at that 591 decameter contour coming into Texas and an upper level high across the lower Rio Grande. This is some fairly stout ridging, so we're going to have to look at the potential here for some heat, maybe starting to see 100-degree temperatures down in Texas. And when it's June, we have to take a look at the National Hurricane Center. The 7-day outlook is not showing anything. Let me show you the GFS graphic. So this is a chart we're going to start using. This looks at the tropics, and we see the trade winds there coming out of the northeast, moving into the Caribbean. And we're looking for waves coming out of West Africa, breaking up the flow and possibly developing into tropical storms. Don't see anything like that in the near term. Looks like some pretty smooth flow through that region. That looks like a wave coming off of Africa around the 13th. So things look a little bit unsettled right there, some troughing. See that flow there is broken up, and some sort of system there coming out into the Atlantic. So that'll bear watching around the 13th through 15th. And we can also look at that on the precipitable water. We see the heaviest moisture down there near the equator, less of it up north. And where we have some of that moisture bulging to the north, that can indicate a disturbance. So that's going to be the 15th. That's going to be part of that wave coming off of Africa. So that will be something to keep an eye on as we get into the middle of the month. Here's a look at the storms around Texas. Very likely there's a few chasers up and down this activity. It's been slim pickings this year, so it's probably bringing a lot of people out there trying to see something. Now the storms down around Fort Stockton, those are being fed by 50s dew points, 60s around the Pecos River region, not quite up to the storms yet. And these cells here, they're in 40s dew points. So those are going to be a bit more high-based and in more of an inverted V profile, as seen on the skew-t. And by that, we're talking about looking at the theta E. You can see that the theta E's are kind of low out there in southeastern New Mexico. So when you bring up a sounding, they're going to look like this. Kind of a spread there between the steep lapse rates and the dry dew points. So that forms kind of a inverted V structure. So that's conducive to strong winds and high-based storms. Now the stuff down around Fort Stockton, the Pecos River region, the soundings are going to look a little bit more like this. Less of an inverted V and more of a typical severe weather sounding. But if we look at that temperature profile, there's a distinct lack of a cap. That means numerous cells, and with that decate being way up there near 1200, that's going to produce a lot of outflow. There's going to be a lot of cells going up everywhere, and pretty quickly you get cell collisions and cell interactions and all that. And looking at the radar, yeah, we've certainly got that going on. Numerous clusters all up and down Interstate 10 over to the Davis Mountains. So as we record this and prepare to render and upload the video, 5:56 p.m. Central, the strongest storm located right there south of Fort Stockton along US 285, US 385. So this area right here probably looks optimal. We kind of want to get on the lead side of this thunderstorm complex. A lot of the storms back here are going to be more affected by the outflow pool, which kind of forms a ring around the storms, kind of like that. So you want to get out there near the better moisture, which is flowing up the Rio Grande and the Pecos River Valley. And that's all I have for today. Hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday evening. I'll leave you with some more footage of San Antonio. Thanks to Greg for that footage. And we'll see you back here once again on Friday. Have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye.